I'm still reading this book, Driving the Green Book. And what is important about this is many times our history, Black history, American history, doesn't get told from our perspectives because we're not the ones that are creating curriculum. And there is an attack on actual history that doesn't edify and valorize a certain demographic of people. The good thing is there's still books, there's still places like what I'm using right now to speak to history and speak to the experiences of Black people living in America. And this stuff is not, it wasn't that long ago that Black people were needing a book to navigate and stay safe and plan how to drive within America. Let's get into some of this. The author of this book, Alvin Hall, him and his partners, they were driving the path that Black people would have driven during the time that the Green Book was written. And so they are interviewing people, they're talking, and Alvin was living during this time. He's an older gentleman, not that old, but he was living during the time that the Green Book would have been used. So this the part that I'm about to start reading from towards the bottom. During our road trip, Janae and I took a tour of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Our conversation with the tour guide brought back memories of my mother's and grandmother's monthly visits to Tallahassee, Florida. They would never take all 7 of us children with them. Usually only one was invited to go, typically during our birthday month. Quite infrequently, they would increase it to 2. When we were walking or sometimes running along Adams or Monroe Street in Tallahassee, our parent had to make sure we did not inadvertently come too close or run into a white person. So as we approached that person, our mother or grandmother would point to something out in the opposite direction and then strategically move herself to the side, approaching the white person so that no accidental contact was possible. Meanwhile, my parent was also carefully monitoring the approaching person's reactions and behaviors. As children, we thought we were being shown the beautiful color of a flowering plant or a building detail similar to one in a picture we had recently looked at in a magazine. Instead, this was a protective dance, thought through and performed so often it was seamless. It was only as I listened to the recollections shared during our interviews and thought back that I saw the back and forth waltz that my mother and grandmother and so many parents and grandparents did during walks down the street. Distract right, step protectively left, distract left, step protectively right. They all gracefully and gently protected us because they knew there would come a day or a single dangerous moment when they couldn't. Imagine. So these certain people are trying to protect their children from knowing history. Now, if you think about my ancestors, they were protecting children from just accidentally bumping into one of those people. Think about that. Children being children, we don't understand that simply bumping into, you know, a palm colored person, a male sapien, could be the difference between life or death. This next passage comes from a man's recollection. His name is Hezekiah Jackson. He says, Daddy would just tell you, matter of fact, that you couldn't do this or you couldn't do that. But Mother would give you a drill. If we are stopped or if some white people say anything to us, you are not to talk. We said, okay, we're not to talk. And then she said, you're not to look at them. I can remember her saying it. We would say, puzzled, we can't look at them? I can hear Mother saying that we couldn't look at them. When asked whether he remembered his parents being stopped while traveling with him and his siblings in the car and what that was like, Jackson responded in a way that's deeply familiar and true for many African American families who were on the road during this time the Green Book was published, as well as years after. It was horrifying. It really introduced us to the real world where simply driving and walking could be dangerous if you were a Black person. All of these aspects of the trip, checking the condition of the car, preparing all of your food because you might not be able to buy a meal, having a strategy if no bathrooms are available to you, planning for the possibility of not being able to buy gas, making sure you have reliable contacts along the route, knowing how to shield your children from the ugliness of racism, were the additional parts of preparation that Black people had to think through in the hopes of lowering the risk of travel. But there was also a toll for protective, loving Black parents and grandparents. Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative explained as he reflected on his childhood. My grandfather would say things to me as a child, like whenever a white person comes up to you, don't look them in the eyes. You always say, yes, sir. You always say, no, sir. There were strategies you had to adopt to stay safe. My grandfather was a proud man. He was a smart man, but in the presence of white people, he would become this something else that was deeply painful for him because he wants to model something for me, but at the same time, he wants to keep us safe. There was that duality, that burden that I think few people understand. So that's where we were. That's where many of us still are in this country. And so there is a whole contingent of people that are really trying to shield their children from the realities of what their ancestors put our ancestors through. And not even ancestors, because the Green Book was written after slavery during the Jim Crow era, the 1930s through the 1960s. It was important for Black people to have this because we couldn't use the bathrooms, we couldn't eat, we couldn't sleep. And that made for a danger on just while traveling. Because of the Great Migration, many of Black people left the South. But for things like funerals, weddings, to visit grandma and grandpa, to visit other families, we had to travel. And because it was not safe, we had to employ these strategies. And the fact that parents had to drill into their children, you can't look at people a certain way. You can't accidentally walk by and touch somebody because it could be subject to life or death. And the crazy thing is, many of us know that these sundown towns, these towns that are antagonistic towards Black people, are still here. And these people, some of these people that they talk to are still alive. So that means that the people that were antagonizing them are still alive. So that is the reason why history is important, and hearing from the people that were living this history is important. But there are still people that do not want history taught. But that's the reason why I will continue to talk. Anyways, you guys go ahead, jump in the comments, tell me what you think, like, comment, share.